Hello and welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hack Show. I'm Matthew Head. In today's episode, we're going to talk to Stuart Marsden, Product Manager for Claro software. Claro develop assistive technology for the neurodiverse, from products ranging from a writing helper to text-to-speech software. He has a background in medical devices. In fact, he even has a PhD in medical modelling and musculoskeletal machines. He has an MSc in medical physics and, to round it all off, a good old-fashioned MEng in mechanical engineering. Stuart himself is actually neurotypical, so it's going to be really interesting to see his insight on designing software for the neurodiverse. As always, I will post links to anything we talk about in the show notes, which will be available at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. Welcome to the show, Stuart.
Hello, Matt. How are you?
I'm not too bad. How are you doing?
Very good, thanks. Thanks for the introduction. I sound frighteningly overqualified.
I dived into your LinkedIn profile the other day and I was like, wow, I didn't realize he got all of these qualifications. Huh?
Well, what that means is he didn't want to get a real job, so he stayed at university for ages and ages and ages.
I was going to ask you actually to kick off, why did you want to go study a PhD in the area you have done?
Well, I did mechanical and design engineering, and there's a lot I did like and a lot I didn't like. And the stuff I didn't like was machines and thermofluid dynamics and oil and gas. And strangely, the mechanical engineering, the way people think of it, was a bit dry for me. But I did like the bio side, and it started to get introduced just about the time that I was in my second or third year. So I went down that sort of biomechanics route, because the human body is a machine, right?
Yeah, it is.
After all. So a bit of biology and a sort of really just interesting problems to solve, really. Yeah.
Which university was that you did that in?
Yeah, Newcastle. I did both my undergraduate, which was like a 4-year engineering masters, MEng.
Yeah.
I did that, and then I stayed there to do the PhD. My 4th-year project was to build like a wearable, like a robotic arm, but passive. You wore it and it measured the orientation of your arm.
Oh, okay.
It was related to orthopedics, and I did a decent enough job of that I got offered a scholarship.
Oh, wow.
To stick around. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you obviously went on and kept your scholarship going and then worked in medical devices for a time. What were you doing in that?
So it was an extension of the bioengineering. I went into assistive technology straight after the PhD. So to get in there, to get my foot in the assistive technology door, I joined the NHS on the clinical scientist training scheme.
Okay.
With the goal of becoming a sort of clinical engineer. And I got a post with the Regional Technical Aid Service, and they made sort of bespoke or custom devices for people with quite severe disability, people who couldn't find a solution to their needs on the shelf, if you like, and very specific, often quite extreme needs, quite often mechanical things, but sometimes software, sometimes electronic stuff. And I had a career in the NHS for about sort of 6 years or so. Okay. The NHS.
So that gave you quite a, from what you're telling me, it gave you quite a grounding. You ended up doing not only mechanical sort of physical movements and servos and all that kind of bolt-on stuff. You were doing some of the software side of it. Because I was kind of thinking that you've done 6 years of designing medical devices, and then did you drop into the assistive software after that?
I was part of the training scheme after my PhD. I was doing some software during my PhD, actually, because it was modelling, the mathematical modelling, computer, that MATLAB and stuff. So I was doing some then, but the training scheme itself in the NHS had a design of medical electronic instrumentation, clinical and scientific computing, as well as assistive technology as 3 sort of specialisms. And I was never really a software developer, never have been.
Okay.
But I've always been fascinated by it. I have made stuff with code, firmware, and little handheld gadgets, and a few sort of things that you know on a screen.
Yes, yeah.
You know, but it depended on what need was put in front of me. You know, the patient's need required a mechanical solution. They got a mechanical solution, but otherwise, they got what I was capable of producing. You know,
so you'd actually go away, look at the patient's need, and go away and teach yourself the bits you didn't know if you needed to fulfill that need, or at least go find somebody.
Yeah, I think more working with the team. You know, quite often everyone was developing skills, you know, all the time to meet, you know, the needs of the user. But, you know, having a mechanical workshop and, you know, having experts around you is a great thing. And obviously in the NHS, there are very clever people all around you. It's
super dedicated, I imagine, as well.
Yeah. I think that's part of the reason I went in this sort of general direction, because there's no challenge getting out of bed in the morning. You know, you're motivated, you're committed to the job, and they're really, really close to the person you're helping. You're not sort of making something for someone else. You know, you actually get to work directly with the user, which is, you know, really motivating.
Yeah, I can see that. I imagine day by day, you go in and you try like a prototype and it kind of works. You see their face light up, and then you're like, right, I'm going to stay here. And then you look at your watch and it's like 7 o'clock at night and you're still trying to get this bit to work and all that. Yeah, I can see it being really fulfilling.
There's some pictures of me quite a bit younger and quite a bit thinner, sort of wiring myself up to electrodes and like proper mad scientist stuff, you know, sitting there trying to get this sensor to work at stupid o'clock, like you say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good fun, that kind of stuff, though. Do you find like the clever thing that nobody's thought of? There's something really, really satisfying with that, or just that trying to get the puzzle to come together, and you know you've got like 90% of it. What's the extra 10% I need to get this thing to snap in, and then it will go. And then
when it works, and you like call everyone in, come on, look at this thing, and when you press a button, the light flashes or something, and everyone's like, "Yeah, well done, you made a light flash." You're like, "No, I made a light flash. Do you not understand? This is the best thing ever. Press the button. Look."
Come on. Yes. So us engineers get excited at all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, we do, and I don't want that ever to go away.
No, definitely not. So did you say you did 6 years at the NHS? Was it then into Claro after that, or had you do something in between?
Something in between. So I was up in the northeast of England in the NHS, and I met met the person who was to be my wife eventually.
Right. Okay.
So I met her up there, and we are both from the northwest. She got an opportunity. She's in the higher education sector. She came down, and we moved down back to the northwest together. And I found a role in medical devices down here.
Okay.
So that was outside the NHS, and it was in a sort of a private manufacturing company, making medical devices. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So do you still do the customer facing? What am I on about? Did you still do the patient facing stuff, or was that a bit more remote from the end user at that point?
It was much more remote from the end user. I think that's the heart of why I'm not there now, to be honest.
Okay.
End user, customer, service user, patient. I never quite know what the right term is. And I used to call them customers, and it's a patient. But wait a minute. For when you're making a medical device, the user could be in our case, it was the surgeon, really.
Oh,
in a way. Okay, so you're thinking of how they're going to hold it, how they're going to pass it through a sterile barrier, how they're going to dispose of it, you know, how it needs to be safe, of course. And you do think about the patient, but yeah, it's the woman or man that's holding the gadget in an operating theatre that you probably think about the most.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So were you doing things like keyhole surgery? That's what immediately comes to mind, that kind of all the arms and stuff.
Nothing quite as exciting, sadly. Okay. So without dressing it up at all, it was tubes. Very clever tubes with different attachments at different ends, and some tubes branched off into multiple tubes. And they all had different thicknesses, and basically extruded tubes, and they were single use, so for suction and for cleaning out sites. If you get a bleed, you end up want to wash it with sort of saline, or you want to remove that liquid from the site of operation, and it's just tubes to do that. It doesn't sound very glamorous, but it was very challenging.
Yeah, I can see the sort of, as you say, the lack of glamour when you say it's just tubes and you draw a sketching CAD and extrude it down it. But actually, the challenge of getting it to work with the surgeon and the human body is where the kind of fun of that comes out of. The end product might not be as exciting.
How do you make it so it's cost effective but still safe? How do you sterilize it? How do you design it so that people in a clean room can make it efficiently? There's a lot of good engineering challenge there.
Yes, yeah. So you sort of made, at some point in your career, a little bit, I'd said, a sort of slight left turn to Claro from medical devices, where you're now doing software that people sort of interact with on a computer screen rather than surgeons having it in their hands. How did you come about ending up changing to that?
It was just over 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years or so. And I just felt I was too far away from the user, or the end user, the patient, and so I used to enjoy that really close relationship building with a person with a need. But the medical devices, despite being a good engineering job, great experience, great team, I just wanted to get a little bit back on the AT train, the assistive technology. The AT train, the assistive technology train. So I just saw this opportunity at Claro, and I wasn't leaving. I wasn't running away from the job I was in. I was just running towards this one rather. It was there, and I don't know, it like a lazy Sunday afternoon. I just happened to look at an advert for something, or I just saw something, or I can't quite remember. And I went, I might give them a ring. It wasn't, it wasn't like, I must get this job and I'm desperate to leave where I am. It was nothing like that. It just, I don't know, it was a serendipity. I just called, had a conversation, and, not long after that, I was working at Claro software. It was all very, unglamorous again, I suppose.
Sometimes opportunities just happen like that, don't they? You kind of can't really explain it, but you had a phone call, and the next thing you know, you're there. Had you got any awareness of neurodiversity, in particular dyslexia, before applying for the job at Claro?
No direct awareness. As you said in the introduction earlier, I am neurotypical, whatever that means, because we're all diverse and we all learn differently. And
exactly,
I think if you had a candid conversation with my wife, she'd probably have a few things to say about how neurotypical I actually am. I have like things in straight lines a little bit more than the norm, and I'm scarily good at logic puzzles and certain other traits that you might associate with some neurodiversities, but no diagnoses anyway.
Okay.
Something about dyslexia. Obviously, we're talking about dyslexia, but not just dyslexia. I've obviously, like most people, like everyone, I think I have friends, loved ones, family members who are neurodiverse.
Yes.
Always have. I've worked with people. I've been sort of managed people with neurodiversity, and I don't quite know. I don't really want to treat people with neurodiversity any different than I would anyone else. That's obviously the point. I don't know, with the, I'm so driven to level the playing field for people who traditionally are seen as having a disadvantage. I got to go to university, and I was the first in my family to do it. And that wasn't, I didn't have any neurodiversity blocking me from doing that, but it was still a challenge for me for other reasons. And my wife, similarly, we share that value, trying to make things fair, really. So I've worked with, as a dyslexic, I'll give an example. As a dyslexic student I was working with when I was doing my PhD, I used to do a lot of tutoring, sort of pay the bills, make sure fridge was topped up with beer and things like that.
Beer and pasta, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Beans if you fancied a treat. Yeah. And I had one student in particular, and he approached me in I think it was a MATLAB lab session, actually. So we're in MATLAB working away.
If you don't know what MATLAB is, it's really horrible kind of modeling software you have to use as an engineer. Yeah. Particularly if you're doing software stuff. You put it on blocks and then it will sort of work, but most of the time it won't. Yeah. It teaches, you have to do it its way. It's not very flexible, but I've got a little soft spot for MATLAB. But this student in particular didn't have a soft spot for MATLAB, and he probably still has nightmares today. Now, he was a dyslexic man, of course, at the time. Also an international student. So, challenges communicating. But I think him more than anyone else, from a dyslexia point of view, not just a broad neurodiversity point of view, him more than anyone else was probably the best ideas person I've ever known. Just unbelievable. The pace at which he'd sort of churn through conversation topics was difficult. Yes. Sort of having a coffee with him for 2 hours was the most exhausting 2 hours you can imagine. But in a nice way, though, because you got so much from it. But I don't know how he just burned through his days like with ideas. He's a very successful engineer now. All because of my tutoring, of course. Of course, but why else would it be? but he taught me that his only barrier was the written communication, but the ideas, the thought process, the problem solving. He was is a superb engineer, but he was labelled just with this disabled button or stamp or sticker. It's just not true. That's just absolutely not true. He was not disadvantaged by his condition. He was disadvantaged by the system around him, having to write essays and, having to communicate with writing. But otherwise, genius, even. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It is tricky how the education system sort of does that. I remember my later years at university doing my MEng, and I didn't get scribes for the last bit of it because it's just like we've moved away from the maths, the calculations, the working out fluid dynamics, all that kind of stuff, to writing long essays on, why this chemical factory was down in ethics and engineering and stuff. And it's really interesting. And I remember consuming the whole thing via video on YouTube and then talked so fast about all the information in my head, the scribe couldn't keep up. It's like, you're going to have to slow down. Yeah. You're going to have to slow down. Get me another scribe. Yeah, get me two of them, please. War and peace. But there was no way I'd have got that on the page without the people who volunteered to scribe at the university to do that. And that was, it was such a shame in the later exams. You see my grades start to drop at the point when more text-heavy exams and coursework come in versus the maths and calculation and the sort of physical world stuff that we did before. It's unfair. It's unfair. I'm just good at exams. That doesn't even make me a good engineer. I'm just really good at exams, and that actually has, in hindsight, potentially disadvantaged me. Yeah, because I've just breezed through a few exams, and you asked me to remember certain equations or how to solve certain problems now, and obviously we've got Google and stuff, and you don't just learn how to solve equations when you're training to become an engineer. You learn you don't other things, lots deeper things like leadership and management and problem solving and all of that. But yeah, somebody said to me in another conversation a year or so ago that learning to learn builds resilience, and it makes you stronger, and you've got to face these barriers and these challenges. Yes. And I sort of thought on that a little bit and talked to some other colleagues about it and came to the conclusion that that was a very ableist way of thinking. Because you as a dyslexic person are resilient enough. You know what I mean? You're already resilient. How resilient do you need to be to get to university with a neurodiverse condition? You don't want extra
arguably needless challenges put in front of you.
Yeah, man, I was out of school for 8 years, left college for 8 years before I plucked up the courage to go to university. That's how much it dragged me through my 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is tricky. Like, as you said, learning stuff for exams and stuff like that. I don't think I could do a Fourier series from scratch now.
Barely spell it, but that wasn't a joke. No. I don't think I
can. But you think, you and I done STEM subjects, and STEM subjects tend to be geared, well, they're not geared towards neurodiverse, but they maybe suit neurodiverse more. What if your passion is law or even English or something that needs a lot more heavier coursework, or you want to go to quite a sort of popular institution that really thinks that doing a lot of written work and the stuff that doesn't play to your strengths as a dyslexic or neurodiverse person, that's kind of a big barrier, isn't it? Which I think you're trying to smash down by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I think you don't have to be a good football player to be a good manager, and you don't have to. I mean, people with a visual impairment can appreciate art. Just because you can't read doesn't mean you don't enjoy a good book or want to be a creative writer or, actually enjoy reading or writing essays. Just because you've got this. In fact, having that, I'm going to use the word handicap in the golf sense, not in the, or in a horse racing, having that handicap actually in the sense of sport does make you improve faster because you're carrying that extra weight almost. So when you do succeed, it's a bigger win.
Yeah.
And don't let that stop you. You've not let that stop you from doing what you're doing.
No, not at all. No.
Maybe it slowed you down.
Yeah, I'd say it was quite a bit. And getting over the emotional baggage took me a very long time, like 30 something. So that's hard. But actually, coming out the other side of it, and it's, I guess, one of the reasons Dyslexia Life Hacks exists to this podcast, it's you actually realize you can do quite a lot of this stuff, and actually maybe coming out trying to put a positive spin on it, coming out the other side of it and losing the baggage and the slowdown. You're like, wow, all this speed comes in and away we go.
Yeah, it needs to go a little bit further than that, and not just dropping baggage and getting over these disabilities, but actually recognizing the strengths that come with the neurodiversity as well.
Yes, yeah.
That's very important.
Yeah, I think so. It's realizing that when you're part of a team, you're bringing something to it rather than just like, I'm here, but I have to get that guy to check my presentations or whatever. But actually, 10 minutes earlier, he wanted to help with his model on his computer or whatever, or I come up with this design solution that he hadn't. So, you do. Diverse teams are brilliant because everybody plugs in the gaps that other people don't have.
Provided that everyone's mind is open and inclusive and recognizes not just the weaknesses, but the strengths as well. And they could be due to a neurodiversity or otherwise, Don't ask Alice to have a conversation with anyone because she's not a really good talker, but give her a problem to solve with AutoCAD in a couple of hours and she'll blow you away,
Yes.
Just recognizing that in people shouldn't impede them.
We're all flawed individuals in some way, even.
Speak for yourself.
I was going to say, your problem is you're not modest enough.
Honestly, I am terrifyingly modest, but yeah.
Yes, it is definitely the kind of, I think the positive messages that are coming out about neurodiversity now are really starting to help shift that tide of the whole, I thought you were just thick.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is really helping. Like, I've had guests on the podcast who are neurotypical themselves, and they're almost trying to logic whether they might be neurodiverse. Years ago, they'd be, no way. Like, of course not. I'm miles away from those people who get up early, who sit behind in exams or whatever. And it is great that we're starting to shift the language around it and the sort of word is getting out there. I thought we'd sort of move on to having a look at what you do for Claro and almost give you an opportunity to shamelessly plug what Claro does if anybody's never heard of them before.
Yeah, shamelessly plugging. No shame. Yeah, Claro's been around since 2004. So coming on for 20 years, and the flagship product that Claro is best known for is called Claro Read. And even today, it's doing strong with all the technology around us that you would have called assistive technology just a couple of years ago, like speech to text, dictation, talking to a speaker in your kitchen to play the radio, asking your car to navigate you to your next engagement, whatever. That's all assistive technology that's become mainstream, just like a pair of spectacles. So we at Claro have Claro Read, which is sits on your screen and it just reads aloud text. Very simply, really. You grab some text from somewhere, press play, and it speaks it to you. And there's lots beyond that, deeper, like you can change the voices, and there's lots of extras that come with it. Lots of screen tinting, because that helps with reading for a lot of people, particularly dyslexic people, tend to benefit from the sort of colour changes. So that's Claro Read. But more recently, we have created something called Writing Helper, which is closer to this levelling the playing field, study skill agenda that we were talking about a few minutes ago. And this is my baby. I do a bit of creative writing, sort of as a hobby. So that's inspired a little bit by that, but also recognizing that essays, writing a good essay about a topic doesn't really say you know a lot or you're competent in that topic. It just says you're good at writing essays. So you're being assessed. You're being assessed on your ability to write an essay, not on your knowledge and understanding of the material. But you take yourself, Matt, and ask you about what you're interested in. And I'm sure you could, go on and on and on about it if you were given that platform.
Yes.
If you were asked to write about it, that'd be a very different beast.
It is.
But you'd be able to demonstrate your competence and knowledge very easily, I imagine. And that's the same for anyone. So Writing Helper's there to take a bit of that pain away, of hopefully helping neurodiverse, or anyone, but neurodiverse people who are stressed and unhappy and unsure and unconfident about writing structured content. And it just guides them through that process. Just gives them a safe space to do it, sort of takes them through from beginning to end and lets them write that essay or thesis chapter or whatever they're writing, lets them write that without the constant doubt, self-doubt, am I doing the right thing here? It feels like I should probably be fixing these spelling mistakes. Or, I know, I'll go and make that. I'll change the font. Oh, different line spacing. 4 hours later, you've done nothing because you're still staring at the blank Word document that you've just faffed around with, for lack of a better word, for a few hours. So we're trying to help students focus on the content and not worry about spelling mistakes and stuff like that.
It is, horrible when the whole screen is lit up red or blue. and getting the font right, and I remember getting commented at uni that my reports always looked the nicest because I spent ages making them visually appealing because I knew there was going to be problems with the words. Oh, this looks nice. I want to read this.
There's a natural tendency, isn't it? I imagine for all of us, but particularly with dyslexia, you sort of tend to be aesthetic, creative people. I don't know. I believe that's true. It doesn't mean anyone else can't be creative, but the dyslexic people I know tend to be creative, imaginative, aesthetic, as a rule, with exceptions. Of course, but just the temptation for all of us to go, "Ooh, I will waste some time making this pretty." You work in CAD, don't you? Computer-aided design, and I imagine you do the same there. We should make this prettier. Yeah, sometimes that.
Make this surface just a bit nicer because that would be great. And then you zoom out and realise that you're talking about a 1 millimeter surface that will get lost in the part when it's
no one's ever going to see it, but it's got your initials on it. Don't tell anyone. Yeah.
Yes. So where did the spark for Writer Helper come from?
I think in part the idea in my head about how do you structure creative writing better. That part of that was as the inspiration, but really it was conversations with students, and in the higher education sector, so university students in this country. And I was having a few conversations because we were looking at what we could make, what's the next, can we innovate something? Is there an idea here? Is there something novel we can do? And we had that. I love that. I love being able to do that, being put in a sandpit, and just play, find some stuff, the innovation. I got put in that situation. I was just talking to some students and DSA assessors and study skills trainers and various professionals, disability advisors and dyslexia experts and ADHD experts and mental health experts, and just talking to people, asking them what the pain points were for students. And essays just kept coming up. Writing kept coming up.
Yes.
Exams did as well, and critical thinking. So there were a few different things we were looking at doing. And I couldn't really productize exam success. That would be, to me, it would be YouTube videos and mock exams, but that's very subject dependent. Similarly, critical thinking, that you can't teach that, how to weigh evidence and how to, debate properly and how to judge the quality of someone's arguments and stuff like that. I mean, the world's full of bad examples of that right now. So I'm not going to tackle that. That's a bit above me, I think. But essays and writing, it just boiled down. And I talked to students who said, I just don't know what I'm doing. I said, but you've got a department there. They teach you how to write essays. Oh, but I don't get it. I've got to go and learn it. Then I forget it. And then I don't know how to do it. And I just need to get in and do it and practice and just do it. But I don't know what it is. I don't know how to do it. And it just came from that, really. And then just that nugget of the core is that it doesn't write your essay for you, but it just guides you through doing it at the same time as it teaches you. So you're not doing that whole learn how, then go away and try it and then go, oh, no, I'm getting this wrong. And then you're back to where you were, like uncertain and doubtful. And, but Writing Helper just says, no, stage 1, do this. Then go to stage 2 and do that. And then just, you're not stressed.
Yes, it is a really clever bit of kit. Like I quite like the sort of stage 1, stage 2, and it'll even spit out something that will go into Microsoft Office for you to finish and tidy it up and put all the formatting and the letterheads. It gives you
it gives you an actual properly built Word document. Now, not many people know how to make a proper Word document with styles and proper formatting and a proper bibliography and stuff. It gives you a fully accessible Word document, so you can just click a couple of buttons to change the style, because it's all, I mean, how many people press space bar multiple times to indent a paragraph? Yeah.
Yes. Or don't know you can get it to custom make the context page for you, or the non-breaking space and all that kind of stuff. You almost need a course at the beginning of university that tells you how to pilot Microsoft Word.
Which is a great way to spend some time when you're studying mechanical engineering or geography or whatever it is. You want to go and get your ideas out, and writing an essay should be rethought. It should be actually answering an interesting question, doing a bit of reading and learning about something and answering an interesting question in an interesting way. That's what it really is. But if you have a difficulty writing, it actually isn't that. It becomes another beast, doesn't it? It becomes the writing challenge, not the evidence, argument, knowledge challenge.
Yeah. I used to, coming back to your point earlier about talking it through versus writing it down, I used Dragon all the way through university. And actually, I'd write it with Dragon because I'd basically present it to the wall in the spare room in my house as if I was talking to you like I am now. And I actually spent hours deleting some of the Dragon quirks, but converting the word style into something that sounded like academic wording. And because I had to take conversation, it was the only way I could get it out of my brain in the first place. So actually, the structure thing like that, even if I had to dictate to Writer Helper, then I could just edit that little bit to make it sound like academic writing, then dive into the next bit and then the next bit. And then it's sort of got, even some of that feels like a way it's smoothed the process.
What percentage of someone's time should be spent on the presentation of a document? Should it be 5% or the last 10% at the end? But I think for you, it's probably more like 50%.
Potentially, yeah. I eventually you get the template down, and it iterates.
You get more efficient.
But I guess I realise now it's probably the dyslexia in me, but at the time I didn't know what it was. But I, spent an evening on YouTube learning how to work Word to get everything into dance and do what I wanted, because it saved me hours throughout the whole course. But yeah, you don't want to be spending too long making the essay look right. You just need to get the stuff done, particularly when the workload goes up and up and up.
I use something called LaTeX, which is like a word processing, but you don't see the screen. You have to. It's like almost like code. You just put your words in, and you tell it when there's a new paragraph by saying, "Give me a new paragraph," but you don't actually see the piece of paper that you're writing on. Because I found I was constantly like stressing about, I want the image to be right there in the center, and I want this to be left justified, and I don't like the fonts, and I ended up just giving that up, and I wrote my entire PhD thesis without having seen it. I wrote the whole thing chapter by chapter and never compiled it into a PDF until the end. Then I saw the PDF, and then I dealt with a couple of formatting issues. But yeah, it was just so distracting for me. The idea of looking up and seeing, there's a spelling mistake, and then your flow gets broken. You fix this typo, the typo, then you go back and go, what was I saying? And then you're exhausted, and you go for a cup of tea, and you don't come back to it until tomorrow. And before you know it, months have gone by, and
there's nothing like a deadline to motivate you to get it done, is there?
Yeah.
I'll get to this early. Yeah. I'll get to this in enough time.
I'll do it tomorrow because I'll have more energy then.
Yeah. So I assume you've used Writer Helper quite a bit yourself in sort of testing and stuff. Are you finding it quite useful even for yourself? Are you like, this really works for me? Or can you not quite have that separation?
I can't. It's really interesting. I think in writing helper terms now. Almost like I've transcended it a little bit because I'm using it so much. I can almost do I do it in my head almost. It's like I've learned, that's what we want the student to do, is get so comfortable with it that it's like training wheels or stabilizers. Eventually you might be able to let it go and succeed. If you can get that far, that's a super success story for me or for us at Claro. That's perfect, isn't it? Because you've trained yourself and you've learned this method works for you and you're comfortable and that stress has gone. You're not overwhelmed anymore. That's not to say using Writing Helper is a bad thing. Certainly you'd have to go and learn how to make a Word document like you did, for example. Not everybody wants to.
Yes. Yeah. But I like that idea. And I was thinking that as you were saying it, with building the discipline and the writing skills to then be able to not have to use the software. So when you're in an office and you don't have it on the works PC because for whatever reason, you already know how to do it now. You're just like, right, what would I do if it's right? This. Here's the document rather than, oh my God.
It's interesting. I mean, that philosophy doesn't translate well across all assistive technology. Like, you're not going to cure or fix dyslexia. I think a lot of the historical language is around neurodiverse conditions or mental health conditions around fixing them. And it's not really the right language that it should be about sort of learning to live with and coping with and learning techniques and strategies to help you use those superpowers, if you like, that come with the dyslexia. So it's not, if we keep on learning to spell, eventually you'll be better at spelling. It's a little bit dyslexic.
Yeah. And I think some of it actually is you're dyslexic, but maybe it's just you have a learning way that is different to, I don't know, 70% of the population, whatever it is. And you need to find a strategy that works for you. And then you unlock the door. Like, if you find a way that teaches you how to spell words or how to structure essays, and uses, as you say, the strength of being dyslexic in the correct way, you're off to the races, really. It's suddenly all this stuff starts working. You can write essays, you can spell a bit better, you can get your thoughts in order. You're not kind of flying off trying to be creative when you really need to focus and all this kind
of confidence, isn't it? Such an important thing.
Indeed.
Such an important thing. I mean, you can use dyslexia or a diagnosis of anything as an excuse, can't you?
You can,
yes, and it's easy to do, and you can be forgiven for that. That's not a bad thing. That's not a sin. Saying, "Oh, I've got dyslexia and I need more time." That's right. That's okay. But don't say, "Oh, I've got dyslexia. I'm as you said before, Matt, I'm thick." It's a shame that anyone can still be in that situation. You're not at all. You're just differently able. You can't spell, but look at these other wonderful things that you can do. No one's perfect at everything. You can run faster. You can, play chess better or whatever it might be. But so, just saying, I'm stupid. I'm never going to succeed at this. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm useless. I'm hopeless. That's an awful thing particularly for young people, to be thinking.
I think once you start, unfortunately, learning the negative emotional side of it, the whole thing sort of cascades in on itself. By that point, you're sort of 10, 12, hitting your GCSEs, and well, English is a write-off. Am I good at this? Well, I'm rubbish at this. It's a shame that quite a few talented people feel like that.
It's cultural. It's language. It's changing. Yeah. It's getting better all the time. Being a dyslexic today is easier than it was 10 years ago, I hope. But I mean, that's not to say it's easy. But it's never going to be easy. But I guess life isn't. Just having people around you who allow you to talk about it. You don't have to hide it. But I have a lot of conversations from people who still conceal it, don't diagnose it. Particularly even in the DSA, students who are entitled to funding to help them with things like writing helper, or Claro read. The number of students that don't disclose disabilities because they think they'll be, disadvantaged or even discriminated against is still very unpleasant statistics to look at, actually.
Is it? I think I never went to I didn't go to uni 26, but I didn't get any assistant at college. The 18-year-old me would have struggled to tick the box on the form if I'd applied for university. I'd have just struggled through the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then got a lower degree, which would have been a shame.
Yeah.
But by 26, it's like, no, I need to tick all the boxes. But being that much older, that is a shame. It's a shame the numbers are really, really high on it.
Yeah.
Is your team, the development team for Claro, very big at all?
Oh, no. There's about 20 people or so at Claro. Maybe a quarter of them, 5 or so, are non-development.
Okay.
Maybe fewer than that. But that's about right. It was me, product manager. I'm not really a developer. We've got some management folks and marketing, but we're a really small team. But development. There's just one guy working on writing helper and has been one guy throughout the whole thing. I sort of specify it and this developer makes it. I'd say he's absolutely brilliant, but he might listen and I don't want to, don't want to pay too many compliments,
Do you need me to edit that out?
Edit that out for me, yeah.
Will do.
No, he is brilliant. He gets it. I think it's very important. I mean, some engineering, you can give the task to the big task to an engineer without them knowing the context that it's in. Like make a tube that's this long, this diameter, this thickness out of this material, and I want 10,000 of them. Is a task, and the guy doing it doesn't need to know what it's for. You could argue. But I've always disagreed with that. I think the context, even if it's not functionally necessary, it's good for him to know. It gives him a sense that, this is why I'm making this. Oh, that's good. I'm motivated. I'm making this to save lives. It's a bit of tune. It's the same with the developers that I work with. Everything's always framed into the user first. Like, the user wants to be able to click this button and that thing to happen. How can we make that happen? It's good. I love it. It's agile development. It's very different than the medical device side of things.
Yes, yeah. It's more like startup size, 20 people. Do you have a lot of neurodiversity in your team, or do you just not know?
We've got, I think, just a proportionate amount. We don't heavily seek to recruit the neurodiverse, but of course we don't do anything to discriminate either. So we've got there's this. I work with a dyslexic developer daily, and that dyslexia shines through. The idea, some of your listeners, yourself might think, or I might have thought not long ago, how do you write code when you're dyslexic? But actually, a lot of writing code is pressing tab and finding the name of the function, and it's not actually a lot of typing, strangely enough. Yeah. So he's perfectly fine.
Why does my code not work? Because I've spelled the damn thing wrong.
Yeah, as long as you spell it wrong the same way every time, that's perfectly okay. So, fine. I know what he means, and he knows what he means. It's perfectly okay.
And it all works. Yeah. So that sort of brings you nicely on to how you sort of design for neurodiverse people when yourself and a proportion of your team are neurotypical themselves. How do you kind of visualize what's going on in the dyslexic person's mind when they're interacting with your software?
I don't. I think is probably the most honest answer. I can't. I do my best, but it's the same with sort of the assistive technology that I used to make. Like if I'm making let's think of a real example. I had to make a keyboard for someone once who couldn't use their hands. It was a young child. Yes. She had very dexterous feet. Seriously. Okay. So we ended up making a touch screen keyboard that she could use with her feet. I didn't take my socks off and try that.
Yes.
I didn't sort of tie my hands behind my back and try to use it. The answer I'm getting to is that users design it, not me. I can frame the problem. I know the problem they're trying to solve, and I know it probably better than they do. Write an essay, or write an email, or read this text when I can't actually read. Whatever that problem is, I understand the problem, and then I'll think of different ideas and maybe make some prototypes. But then, crucially, I'll put those prototypes in front of people who represent the users, who are usually users actually, or work closely with them. I don't think you can design. Well, you can, but I don't necessarily think you should design without users. User-centered design should apply to services, products, software, processes, websites, clothing, food, whatever it is that you're creating. Mm-hmm. You thinking it's amazing is definitely not the same thing as the user thinking it's amazing. I think I don't want to waffle. Am I waffling?
Not at all.
Well, I'm not necessarily empathic all the time in my life. I can miss really obvious things, like the classic, my wife's got her hair done and stuff, or she's got herself a new top, or whatever, and I'll just miss it.
Yeah, I feel like your wife is going to be active in the comments to this podcast.
I don't know. She's in the house. I don't know if she can hear me. And I get that. I'm not empathic in that sense. And sometimes emotion can get past me, and I'll be like, give me a hug and just like, okay, cool, we're all right now. Let's move on and solve a puzzle. But I think I've got a certain type of empathy that works well as a design engineer. I think because just maybe through experience. I think all the jobs I've ever done have involved translating the needs of someone who isn't me into a solution that I can provide. And this person can't always communicate even. Sometimes they can't even tell me what their needs are. I've got to empathize and understand what would work. And I think it's experience more than anything.
Yeah. I sort of see where you're going with that, and I think it's work for Triumph. You send a lot of people out on bikes to try them because I'm motorcycles myself, so I can visualize me on the machine interacting with whatever part it is. I do it like this, and then you send something else out, and they're like, "This button's just round," because it's just how they're different as users. So you move it around and see how it works. That can be better. And it's very much an iterative process, isn't it? You come out at A, B, and C, as you say, you realise C is good, B is not so good. A's got some interesting features, so you end up bolting them two together, B, A and C, and then it sort of filters through.
D might solve a different problem and users love it. You're like, but it's not the problem we're trying to solve. It's a red herring. There are obviously scientific answers to the question as well. There's definitely methodologies like A/B testing and things. You can actually do science and put half of the users in one room with one product and then the other half with a placebo, and do sort of proper science to get ideas. And that's what we're all guinea pigs now in the agile software world. You'll be seeing a certain button on your Google, and I'll be seeing a different button somewhere else on the screen. And Google's measuring who's pressing which buttons, and they'll say, the green button is much more popular than the blue one, and they make the button green. That's how it works now. That's proper data,
Yes, yeah. Especially with the scale of something like Google.
but when you're making a keyboard for one child who types with her feet, it's a totally different process. You take it to her and you put it in front of her, don't you?
Well, you have to, don't you? And then she gives you feedback, or she just uses it in a different way to what you ever thought. We were discussing, weren't we, in an early talk when we first sort of got to know each other with did the inventor of a screwdriver think that we're all going to use it as lever bars?
Yeah.
Because the engineering challenge is completely different when you stick it in a tin of paint and bend it as a pry bar rather than turning a screw. And at what point are they like, okay, we have to beefen up the shaft of the screwdriver to make it work?
Snapped a screwdriver the other week doing exactly that. And I'm a nearly 40-year-old engineer. I've been using screwdrivers for a very long time and I should know better. And I've actually got the right tools to lift up a floorboard. But no, screwdriver was right there. So what did I do?
Because it's next to your hand.
Yeah.
And you just grab it. Yeah.
And it's, anyone who tells me they've not ever used a butter knife as a screwdriver as well is lying.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What was I doing the other day? And it's like, why am I trying to get a proper level for this? I've got one on my phone and just stick it on things.
Calibration, whatever.
It's a quick look see more than anything serious. But it is funny with sometimes when you have to look at stuff and how you put something in front of somebody and they're just like, well, I hadn't even thought that they'd use it like that.
That's remarkable. Wow. That's incredible that you even, you get some good ideas that way as well, watching people, break stuff wrong and use things wrong.
Yeah. So what sort of thing has surprised you the most, really, when you've been developing stuff for particularly dyslexics?
Oof. That's interesting. I think the... It's difficult to answer without giving specific examples and dipping anyone in the dirt. Really, I think that back to what we were just talking about is how different a user behavior is than what you think it should be. I say, right, you are supposed to click this and then click these and then do that. But just watching users, any user, even the user who is closest to you in terms of, what you'd expect them to do, they just still completely surprise you. That's not a specific example. I don't want to give one. There's one jumping out at me, but I don't want to give it. There's a good friend of Claro now is using Writing Helper and fond of it, but he's using it in a very, I would say, interesting way, but succeeding with that. And I'm like, well, okay, that's okay then, isn't it? Totally not what I expected. But,
the mind boggles.
It making a success. You're dyslexic yourself. And, the idea of, going from A to B in a straight line is not necessarily something you're well known for as a cohort, is it? So, getting to B eventually and following whatever route you take is okay, right?
Oh, definitely. And sometimes it's actually better and ends up being everybody else's route. Like, really? You can,
that's amazing. How do you do that? And halfway through your explanation, I have no idea what you just said. But if it works for you, fine.
Crack on. How do you find the communication between dyslexics and, say, yourself with being neurotypical? Is there any... I mean, when we bring it to an individual level, it all breaks down because you have to communicate differently with everybody because of each person's personality and particular background. But sort of in more general terms, I was thinking.
I think it's a compromise, a constant compromise between letting, and not that I'm not allowing or preventing, but encouraging that free flow, that idea, don't put a dyslexic person in a box sort of approach. So ask a question, have a conversation, but trying not to let it just go too far. And this is the same with all sorts of people, actually. But I'm a very rational, linear, logical, black and white type of person. I'll ask a question that is a yes, no, and it won't be leading. You know, I'm sort of trained to ask a non-leading yes, no question, like you know, I know not to expect a yes or a no from a dyslexic person, right? I know that. So it's factoring that in, and they'll say yeah, and it's worth listening. Usually, I would say it's worth listening, but then having a technique or strategy to. Usually with humor, just say, right, oh come on, you've gone too far now. We were talking about this button, and now we went on to bicycles, and then you were talking about traveling to the moon, and now you're talking about the garden plants, and then your cat's new collar. So, right, I'm going to rein you back in now. Let's get back to the question. You said no to that. Let's answer the. You know, it's doing that in a way that is not, unpleasant. It's just making sure that you're communicating still. You're not interrogating and removing that human sort of energy from the conversation. Really, it's you'll quickly lose the other person if you
particularly get impassioned by like I've just seen this and it's a brain dump. And you got to let them be passionate about it, because obviously just shoot them dead and then it's just whatever.
But the idea, well, we're not talking about that. Shush. Let's get back on topic. No, none of that. But you do. I think another rule of thumb is to give yourself a little bit more time. I might have a 5-point questionnaire that I want to put in front of a dyslexic person, and I'd say, 5 minutes, plenty time, a minute per question. No, I'll give it half an hour. It's better to have the time and not need it than not have the time and then need it. It's just building that in. It's just accommodating that advanced communication, verbally, certainly, that you get from from dyslexic people as a rule.
Yeah, okay. And sort of that question in reverse, what would a dyslexic person, what could they do to improve their communication with somebody who's neurotypical?
Well, you're communicating with me all right. Are you finding it difficult?
No, not at all.
Am I awkward?
No. But it's something, the example I sort of bring is like, obviously, as you said, I work with CAD, and I don't necessarily need lots of stuff on the screen to feel the gaps in my brain, but you can sometimes see some of my colleagues who are very talented engineers in their own right slightly glaze over, and it's like, hang on, and just draw it in.
I understand.
I see.
That big picture thinking. Again, I don't like to stereotype, but the stereotype is that dyslexics can see the big picture all at once. So when you've got this complex machine in CAD and there are parts covering other parts, you actually know what's inside, and you can see it moving, and you know exactly how things interact with one another, all the mates and stuff between the components, and all of that stuff's clear to you, and it might not be to others. I suppose that's a good question to ask, because we're talking about how do we help these disadvantaged dyslexic people. Let's just swap that around and say, how do I, dyslexic person, help this disadvantaged neurotypical here who doesn't see the world in the right way? How do I break it down for this poor neurotypical here? And it's having that pity. It's having that
pity. No, it's not quite that.
Not pity. Having that empathy works both ways, doesn't it?
It does indeed. I mean, we're all trying to build a better world. So let's all work together to do that. And how do we talk each other's style?
Or even not. How do we translate our thoughts into a way that person will understand? And you can't really do that without knowing that other person. Married to my wife for a few years, and we can usually communicate without words. Sometimes there are certain expressions like, "Oh, she wants chocolate," or he's thirsty. I'll make a brew," or whatever it might be. You can pull a certain face in a room with other people, and no one else will know what that face meant. But what the face meant was, "Look at the state of that dress she's wearing over there. I think I'm going to go and get some crisps." But that's because you know that person, and I can assume if I'm going to meet someone who I know is dyslexic, or they can assume they're going to meet me and they know I'm not. They might make some assumptions, and they're very likely to be wrong.
Heuristics, aren't they?
But they're very likely to be wrong. I mean, in the specific sense, you're right. Heuristically, okay, this dyslexic person, I'll make more time. I'll be prepared to go off topic a little bit. Conversely, if it was an autistic person and I had some idea, I might sort of prepare myself in a different way. But until you meet the person, you don't know.
It does. It all falls away when we're just dealing one-on-one. I think that's a good place to sort of start rounding this out, which I've got a few standard kind of rapid fire podcast questions I like to round this show out with. They don't need rapid fire answers from yourself. So
no pressure.
You can go on for as long as you like. So the first one is, what prejudice did you have about dyslexia that has been proven wrong?
I don't know where to start with that. I think I genuinely did believe that it was just bad spelling when I was younger. I've known for a long while, though, that's not the case. I know scientifically what it is now. It's about the sounds, the phonological processing. So I know what dyslexia is now. So that's obviously the most profound change for me, the understanding of what it actually is versus this, I can't spell because I'm dyslexic. Yes, you can. It's just harder.
Yes, yeah. Okay, that brings me nicely to my second one. If an alien come down, how would you describe dyslexia to them now?
We, the human civilization, hasn't always written things down. We used to communicate in other ways. We most likely spoke before we wrote, and we might have had hand gestures and combinations of body language. And at that time, there were no dyslexics. And it's very likely that the people who had dyslexia in them at that time were the leaders and the better communicators, the people who came up with the ideas and protected their society. It's very likely that the dyslexics had the strengths of creativity. But then we invented language in the written form, letters and numbers, and each shape represented a sound. And when you put those shapes together, you end up with a sequence of sounds that represent the words you're speaking. And it just so happens that we'd evolved very well without this. And then we'd built up this trait called dyslexia. We didn't know it existed at the time. But then as soon as people started trying to use this, we realized that a quarter of them really struggled with it. And these people who were the leaders and the pioneers and the creatives were suddenly disadvantaged in this written world. And we're still struggling with that today. Thousands of years of written language, tens of thousands, I don't know how long, compared with how long there's been humans. We've had writing probably for less time than we haven't had writing.
Yes. Yeah.
It's relatively new, and dyslexics are still trying to catch up.
Yeah. What a brilliant way of putting it. I quite enjoyed that answer. Okay, the final question of the podcast, really, and of course, because the name of the podcast is the Dyslexia Life Hacks shows, any dyslexia life hacks?
Get writing helper.
I knew that'd be your answer. Yeah. I was like, I know what he's going to say.
No, I really don't know. I've never. Obviously, I'm not dyslexic. I don't know. I think it's quite useful to. It's maybe not a life hack, but know yourself is really important. And part of who you are is dyslexia, but there's so much more to you. But knowing that about yourself and being comfortable and confident with it is probably the best thing anyone can do. Really, just accepting it, learning yourself, learning about yourself, how you learn.
I think once you've accepted things and learned yourself, you then open the door to find things to help, or the right places to go, or people who just are like-minded and enjoy you for you, rather than trying to be yourself because everybody else is taken, I think is Mark Hemingway's quote.
Excellent, yeah.
So that sort of brings us to the end of the show. Is there anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, but just other than thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a great chat. I really enjoyed the time's flown, actually. I can't believe we've been chatting for that long. It's been really, really good talking to you. It's good to see you succeeding as an engineer as well.
Thank you very much.
And I'm glad you eventually did go to university and get that MEng.
Yes, Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for the time, and I've really enjoyed it too. It's been really interesting hearing your insight, and particularly your background in medical devices and using it to paint the pictures has been fascinating. So I'd like to thank you for being on, and I'd like to thank everybody out there for giving this show a listen. And goodbye till next time.
Thank you very much.
Hi, it's Matt again. Just before you leave, if you're enjoying the Dyslexic Life Hacks show, I'd really appreciate it if you give us a review on your podcast platform. As we're quite a new podcast, it's really helped get it in front of more people who would really benefit from hearing from it. I thank you and look forward to reading your reviews. Goodbye.